Education had given universities 2 weeks to prepare a list of the institutions to be merged and those to be shut down. At a meeting with the vice chancellors and finance officers of the 31 chartered public universities and 7 university colleges, Education Cabinet Secretary Professor George Magoha asked the administrators to lay the groundwork for drastic measures. The Commission for University Education is only a day shy to submit its report, which is diametrically different from what vice chancellors have drafted so far. But the probing question exercising the minds of many Kenyans today is, will this actually be the eagerly awaited report that will change and have a discernible difference on our higher learning institutions, which is our universities? Well, on Sidebar today, we seek to slice and dice this issue. Now, higher education is at a crossroads and requires a serious rethink. Radical measures are inevitable to re-engineer the sector and put it back on the pedestal. But you know what? That requires courage and resolute determination to push through the reforms. I mentioned earlier that a couple of weeks ago, Education Cabinet Secretary George Magoha directed universities and the Commission for University Education to conduct simultaneous consultations and make proposals to redeem universities. The point of departure was that non-viable universities and programs should be scrapped or merged to make economic and professional sense. From the outset, the merger option was stridently opposed by university management and unions. And not surprisingly, the Vice Chancellor's caucus has since published and submitted proposals to the minister with the overriding rejection of mergers. Nonetheless, they were unequivocal that courses and programs duplicated across universities ought to be scrapped or integrated with others in institutions best suited to offer them. Also, they propose staff rationalization and cost-cutting to reduce expenditures and return universities to financial stability. Now, the VC's position is not difficult to understand. It's never realistic to expect those engrossed in programs or projects to turn around and cut them, and not when it threatens existential interest and jeopardizing careers. The Q, that is Commission for Universities, expected to submit its proposal soon and ideally together with the VC's report, should provide clear direction to recalibrate higher education. But the push for higher education reforms should be determined by practical realities, devoid of sentimental feelings. Massive expansion of universities in the past 3 decades, picking with the mass chartering of public institutions in 2013, set the country on a slippery path. Establishment of universities is whimsical, largely driven by populist political pronouncements, but ignores the national needs and resource requirements. Consequently, we have created more universities than we need. Equally troubling is the declining quality due to lack of finances and personnel. It does not make any lick of sense to hang on to many universities just because they provide jobs for homeboys. Neither should we be held captive to political interest. South Africa and Rwanda took the painful decision to cut the number of universities and turn around higher education. Well, I guess Kenya has reached that critical moment. But before we buckle down to our discussion, here's a post giver from Anita Roddick. She says she's actually a British businesswoman, human rights activist, and environmental campaigner. She says, if you think you are too small to have an impact, try going to bed with a mosquito. Right, I don't have mosquitoes with me tonight. These are big people in the society who are going to actually slice and dice for us what you're going to discuss. So tonight, I've created FaceTime with Professor Bitangen Demo, Associate Professor, University of Nairobi. Also, we're eagerly waiting for Professor Laban Ayiro, who's the Vice Chancellor of Daystar University. Professor Karuti Kanyingi is the Professor of Research Development Studies at the University of Nairobi, and also David Aduda, who is education expert here at Nation Media Group. My name is Debarl Inea, sitting in for Ken Mijungu, who's taking a well-deserved rest in Migori. And why don't you have a show with me as well? Join the conversation. Use a hashtag Sidebar. That is hashtag Sidebar and the Twitter handle NTV Kenya. And then also follow me on Twitter at Debarl Inea. But a pause giver for us as well to see or to act as a segue to our discussion this morning.
As we talk together about restructuring universities, which must be done, the universities must find their strengths.
All the stakeholders will come up with views. Whether we'll say, yes, go ahead and close 1 or 2 or 3, the stakeholders are the ones who can then say, do that.
Every stakeholder is important. There is none more important than another one.
Cabinet Secretary is sitting in Jogo House and spewing decrees as if this country does not have, is not governed by law.
Decrees will be like toilet paper. They will not mean anything.
All right, to continue with the conversation, and of course, we want to see how this will pan out, eagerly awaiting to see if this report will be released tomorrow by the Commission for University Education. But we're given to understand 11 public universities are technically insolvent and cannot meet their financial obligations, according to the Auditor General, Edward Ouko. So the question is this a spawning ground already for a merger, as it is right now, which is a discussion which is ongoing? Let's just begin with you, Professor Bitangendemo.
I think what everybody is saying is an opinion.
Is an opinion.
Is an opinion. We are academic institutions. We're supposed to do research and have data so that we have data-driven decisions. If I ask you what is the optimal number of universities in Kenya, you won't answer that. But everybody is saying we have too many universities. And if you compare with the same countries at the same level number of universities have, you will not arrive at what has been said by many people. We should sit back and say, let's compare with other countries. We have a challenge in the sense that we have a population boom. I mean, we have a bulge. We have a lot of young people. We cannot say we go back and have a few graduates. The best we should do is that we give them the best education so that they take advantage of opportunities in countries that don't have resources. We should not be just be thinking that everybody we teach should work in this country. We should provide the world with the best we have. And I hear people saying we need, the programs are wrong, whatnot, everything. There is no course that is bad at the university. Whether you're doing history or doing science or doing medicine, you have some contribution to make. If we kill sociology, for example, we would not have doctors who can socialize with people. The doctors need to be taught sociology. The engineers need to be taught on how to interact with people. So everybody's throwing things around and not quite understanding what programs, how many universities should we have. And then there is a political question that every county should be, if you are talking about inclusivity,
yes,
every county should have some institution of higher learning. You can't say county X, we don't need a university there. So we need to think this very seriously before we rush to making decisions that are not informed with the data.
All right.
People suspect many things, that satellite campuses are the ones that created the costs to escalate. I think there is a failure on the side of regulation. I mean, they can't just come now and say, we want to do something. They should have protected the public from the beginning. That is the role of a regulator. Now it's coming that the people, the victims are the ones you are saying, chop these universities because you didn't do A, B, and C.
Thank you. So let's hear also from Professor Kanyinga. On that note, just to get introductory remarks from you as well, as we set the pace for this conversation, you support this particular merger, and of course the reforms that are ongoing. What is your take?
Let me begin by trying to thank my colleague here, because he has put the issue in its right context. Let's begin by saying that universities exist for the purpose of producing ideas and knowledge.
Yes.
Secondly, that knowledge must be relevant for the society. And therefore, there is no single knowledge or ideas that are produced that we can say are irrelevant in any particular situation, whether it's philosophy, whether it's religion, whether it's history. All those disciplines have a role to play in national development. The second thing to mention here is that we are talking about universities when we have not asked ourselves what's the role of national universities or universities in this country for the purpose of national development. If you look at it very closely, you will realize that the countries that you mentioned, South Africa and Rwanda, they have put production of ideas and production of knowledge at the center of their national development processes. There is no single policy document in Rwanda or South Africa that is produced without an input from the academics, without an input from research by their own national institutions. They invest heavily in terms of research. In Kenya here, God knows how much the government contributes to research. The last time they contributed to the research kit was about 3 or 4 years ago, and that money has never been disbursed. The second thing we need to note here very carefully is that we are asking this question about merger when we have not resolved the fundamental problems of universities in this country. In all public universities in this country, we have 2 universities in one. We have got an administrative university that has got the largest manpower, the largest human resource, doing nothing, comprising support staff, and we have got the academic staff that produce ideas and teach. When you look at the ratio of academic staff to the support staff, or the ratio of academic staff to the administrative staff, is 1:5, 1:7 in many, many universities. In the West, including countries, universities in South Africa, the ratio of academic staff to administrative staff is 1:0.25. King's College in London, it's 1:0.1 of administrative staff, because most of the administrative staff are carried out by students who are doing their PhDs, who are doing their graduate studies, name it. In the country here, what we have is that universities now are the source of employment for everyone. Politicians are putting a lot of pressure on counties to establish universities.
Yes.
At the end, we have missed the purpose of why universities exist. We tend to think that universities are existing for purposes of producing employment or generating income for the counties where they are established, without asking the question, have we trained enough PhDs? Have we trained enough professors to be teaching in these universities? Let me end up by saying, I know of many universities that were recently introduced in this country, where the quality of the professors leaves a lot of question marks. Professors must teach, must research, must publish. If you go to Google Scholar and look for the names of some people who are calling themselves full professors in these universities, you'll not find them. And that's why I think even the Q report that you are talking about is dead on arrival. It's dead on arrival.
Thank you. Thank you. And I like it. You talk about research, you talk about publishing of the professors as well. The fundamental question will be, again, also, when it comes to administration of universities as well, do we need also the professors to actually be the vice-chancellors? Or we can get also administrative officers to actually run this institution?
We have done a terrible mistake in this country of thinking that, yes, professors are the only people who should be administrators of these universities.
But hang on, we will get to that.
There are some positions in administration that should belong to the professor, but not all of them.
Fair enough. Let's hear from David Aduda, your introductory remarks as well.
Thank you. Listening to the 2 professors, one of the things that comes to mind is that we need to rationalize. And there's clear distinction between mergers and rationalizing. Professor Kanyinga has made a very good point, and I'll back to the statistics, that if you look at the ratio of the administrative and the teaching staff, it is 70% administrative, 30% academics. Where should we put emphasis on academics? And the example is given, I really concur. Now, this is what we call rationalizing. We look at our cost structures and our needs and ask ourselves what fits our circumstances. We don't need more admin staff. We need more academicians. If you look at the ratios, I know you have in some universities, the professor is a principal or is a dean, and there's no professor who is teaching in the class. Cumulatively, we have like professors constituting 9% of the total teaching staff. Yet we need to have a higher percentage. So what does that mean? That we've put resources where you don't need them. And that's why I'm calling for rationalization. So we look at what do we need. And I will also add that looking at the kind of academic programs, we need to ask ourselves, what do we need? Sharing on Professor Kanyinga's apt definition of what the universities are for, teaching, research, and community service. Now, to be able to do research, you must have people with capacity. Now, you look at some of the programs that we do. Students go through class without doing any research. When they leave at the end of the tunnel, they are not prepared. If, for example, they want to pursue higher education, they're not prepared to go into that line.
Yes.
So there is a gap there. The question, therefore, is, should we have all universities offering similar programs and offering them badly? Or we can begin thinking of, can universities look for areas of competitive advantage and then we support them to do that? Why, for example, should Egerton, which was started as an cultural institution, then have the bulk of its graduates in the humanities? Yet the universities that were started to humanities, which can do it better?
All right, thank you. And of course, I want us, when we circle back from the break, that we can actually peg our thoughts on three aspects, because hearing all of you, there's an aspect of, the market logic. Since we had the structural adjustment, that was fronted by the World Bank way in 1990, that, the government should cut subsidies to universities. And now we had the issue of now having fees, people now profiteering also with the public institutions, profiteering from the fees as well. We've had the market logic entrance, which has brought about the commercialization of universities. Also, we need to look at the political logic as well. I've heard you talking about the counties, and I read also from my intro, there were political pronouncement that yes, now that we have counties, we'll have in each and every county a university. So is that also feasible, right? Then the social logic to it as well. Why are people rushing to have degrees, to have PhDs? Is it because they want affirmation? Is it because it is all about careerism as well? These are critical questions that we need to also look at. So the Commission also proposed the public university be allowed to raise fees to reflect the market realities. That is also an aspect of the market logic that you want to look at as well. So we'll take a short break right now. When we circle back, of course, we shall peg our thoughts on these three issues as well and broaden the discussion largely to see where we're headed as far as the higher learning is concerned in this country. Critically looking also, do you really have to be a professor to actually head or be a vice chancellor of a university? Another probing question as well. Don't go away.
Ukiambiwa 1 plus 2, 10 marks. Huwezi andika 3.
Hebu fanya ujinga, uvae jeans, t-shirt na kofia. Uingie kwa gari, makanga akuitishe fare, umwambie nitakupea tukishuka. Unasikianga? Dondoa moja dere.
Avena contains omega-6 and 9 and is fortified with vitamins A and D. New Avena Premium Vegetable Cooking Oil. Now available in all leading stores.
Ito bausa nini ndogo hapa mimi pia nimtupe huko, I don't care.
Nimekomea mwenye nyumba anakuja. Unanisikiza lakini?
Kama ulikuwa unajua utawezana na hii kazi, si ungesoma, sasa ungekuwa lawyer, pilot.
Welcome to the house of the Janet. You is go where?
Shifiri inaitwa Building Bridges Initiative. Nyenye.
Usi class yako? Uni mama yako na watoto 3 pale Technical Institute.
It will be rough and messy.
The Real House Helps of Kawangware in association with Telcom.
Join Telcom today and share life on our expanded 4G network. Telcom, moving with you.
Nation FM. More music and less talk. Nairobi 96.3, Mombasa 101.5, Meru 93.9, Nyeri 104.9, Eldoret 102.7, and Nakuru on 97.7. Follow us on social media on Facebook at Nation FM, Instagram at Nation FM, and on Twitter at Nation FM KE. Nation FM. More music and less talk.
One day I woke up and I lost everything.
The lights got turned off today.
We need groceries, we need bread. I was wondering if I could get an advance on my check.
Seth, I'm sorry, but we don't do that.
I'll pay you back.
How could he leave us?
I think you're my first love.
You know I'd marry you, even if you were poor.
Stay away from the land.
AMG Realtors brings you Kikopay Ridge. 8-acre parcels located just 5 minutes drive from Nairobi-Nakuru Highway. Book with 50K, balance in 4 months. AMG Realtors. Integrity.
Welcome back. You're watching Sidebar. The question is, has the massification of higher learning compromised the quality of our education? And of course, the probing question as well is, do you think the merging of this institution will be the prime solution? Right, we continue with the conversation with our panelists. I promised when we circle back, we shall also be pegging our thoughts on the market logic. Professor Kanyinga, tell me, the entrance of the magic or the market logic, which was brought by the Bretton Woods Institution, IMF, in 1990, do you think the idea of cutting subsidies from government and paying also fees could be the one of the causative factors of where we are currently in this morass?
First of all, the structural adjustment programs that we are talking about of the 1990s are the cause of fundamental problems that most of the service sectors in Africa are experiencing today. We should not have cut subsidies to education sector, to the health sector, because there is no society that develops without manpower. So they reduced the ability of the government to produce sufficient manpower for future development. That's where things went wrong, and we should actually be seeking the World Bank and other institutions that supported the structural adjustment program to apologize to the African continent for what they did at that particular time. It's research already shows that was wrong. It was wrong move. Even the Washington consensus began to revisit that one. There's no doubt that we did fundamental problems at that particular time. But having said that, the governments in Africa, and including Kenya here, should be asking the question, how do we make national universities or public universities and even the private universities relevant for national development? We have seen infrastructure development in the last 5 or so years, handed by Chinese, handed by different other multinational corporations. Ask yourself, what's the linkage to departments of engineering at technical university, connection to technical institutes in this country? You'll see that none of them have established a connection with technical institutions. If you go to the West, all departments of engineering, technical universities have a national role to play in those particular kind of projects where they generate research, where they generate income, where students gain skills. Here, the connection is nil because the government has no, there is a lot of ignorance also among the policymakers, and I must say that very clearly, because they do not think beyond 5 years. They do not have a vision for about 50 years from today. This is what needs to be factored in when we are talking about national development programs, whether we are talking about infrastructure or any particular kind of programs. We need to ask ourselves, where do we train skills for it? And the universities become a major solution to that one. Right now, there is no connection to what we are doing as a country. Everybody is running silos. Everybody is doing things on their own. And that's not really the way to do national development. And then we start blaming the national universities for not being anchoring their knowledge to reality. That's where the challenge lies. We need to start thinking seriously about national development processes and how we interlink them to universities so that the students that we produce have got very real and practical examples that are anchored on the industry. Today we are blaming the universities for not producing relevant or relevant skills, but we need to ask ourselves, why is it that the government have closed that avenue for generating the skills that we need at the universities to have? So as a policy, the government needs to go back to the drawing board, start insisting on connecting the universities to national development processes.
But why are we blaming subsidies? Because we have also, according to a report here, dubbed the effects of massification on higher education by Ghulam Mohammed Abhai, who is the former Secretary General of Association of African Universities. He says that African governments will be unable to continue to fully fund public higher education institutions in view of budget constraints. Public institutions should be allowed to charge tuition fees to their students. However, this should not be full cost recovery as government must continue to subsidize higher education as a public good, and the fees should be accompanied by appropriate loans and scholarships to protect disadvantaged students as well. But it is unsustainable, right? We should not be raising accusatory fingers to
it's not a question of sustainability. It's a question of what kind of knowledge and what did we want students for. We can actually provide free education up to the university level as long as the skills that we are giving students are skills that are going to be used in the national development process, and the returns are immediate and very high. But we haven't done that. Should be free.
Right, Professor Bitange, what are your thoughts on this?
The paragraph you read is political.
It's political.
It's not informed by anything. I'm saying this because some of the problems that we have in public universities, as well as national government, is that we have not fully utilized the resources that we have. You see some universities rushing to building new buildings, and you find that there is excess capacity in terms of resources like space. And it is because we have this thing like, this is my college, whereas you don't have enough students to fill up that. The other one has more students. We have this silo mentality, which has completely destroyed us. And they're saying we should get more school. Let us first optimize the resources that we have and a study done, and then we say, now actually we have optimized what we have, we need extra resources from these places. And then we, like Professor says here, we must have as part of the KPIs as professors that you must do research out there and contribute to the university.
We will come to the research much later. Yeah. But of course, maximizing and optimizing the resources that you do have, that has been also a niggling worry from the universities, because it seems also you professors, you always have a pail in hand, you know, to the National Treasury that we need more funds, yet you've not, as you say, utilized the resources that you do have. Let's take, for instance, the University of Nairobi right now.
Yes.
The Kabete campus.
Let me clarify that.
Yes.
It's actually a culture that we have, that since last year we got 5 billion, we need 6 billion this year. Nobody actually sits to actually rationalize the resources, that this is what we need this year. This would go towards salaries, this would go towards development, and justify the development. So everybody just works from their own opinion. And that's what is hurting us. I mean, I've been saying from the beginning that let us have evidence-based decision-making. Right now, you should be saying there was this research by Professor Kanyinga stating this, and this is what should have happened. We are not doing that.
Yeah, but the reason why we are not
just
doing
a moment.
that...
Let's say for Madudo will come to Professor Kanyinga. Yeah. But you actually hold with the view that is being put forward here, Aduda, because when we have all these resources, and I know you can give us also statistics, so to speak, or maybe a case in point, like Egerton University, a huge expanse of land that they do have. They're meant to be an agricultural university, but up to now, we've never seen or realized anything that is exceedingly beneficial to the public from Egerton University. I was talking about the University of Nairobi with the Kabete campus, also huge tract of land that you have, almost 50 acres.
It takes
right?
4 years to procure something.
4 years, the procurement process as well?
To procure something that will bring money. We have tightened ourselves, and nobody is talking about this.
Just hold on, just hold on. Let's hear from Aduda, then we'll come to you.
It's interesting. There's a component that adds some substance to the discussion. I know, for example, University of Nairobi has expansive land in Kibwezi, 12,000 acres.
Even in Nairobi, I think we are the second to the Catholic Church.
Yes, and Nairobi, second Catholic Church, and Kenyarelo is previous.
Yes.
Although Kenyarelo has also been now surpassed, which is something else. But the point you're asking is, how do we make good use of this? I think the way we've also structured our university and practices, the way does not allow us to do what we should do. We say that we want to operate as commercial enterprises, but we also operate as bureaucracies. So that, as Professor says, when you realize that I need to get in some money to do this and get revenues, you still go through a lot of process that will not allow you to do what you need to do. So that therefore means that we need to re-engineer the way you manage universities and the way we do processes, because at the end of the day, we need to think not only of restructuring, but efficiencies. How do you create efficiencies? For example, I know in the universities, look at the structure at the top level. Sometimes you find a university with 5 DVCs. And then for any approval, you have to go through a long approval. Now, this is delaying us. So we need to say that if we think of reforming universities, we don't just think of the number of universities, but how we govern the universities and the structures and processes so that the process can lead us somewhere. Now, you talked about Egerton.
Yes.
Egerton equally has expansive land. At one time, I know they started doing yogurt, which again, I don't think is going on. I don't have latest figure on that. But they started even before the Brooksides of this world came to the scene. If they went that route, I think the Brooksides would never have got any space. But we've never been able to optimize on that capacities. And then the converse is, if I'm a professor, if I do that, what comes to me? Because the university also need to have a system in which a professor can bring in research funds and also benefit from it.
Yes.
Yeah. We don't have structure that does that.
We actually have the structure. It's such that when the money comes in, doesn't come out.
Yes.
Yes.
So you see the structure will bring in and does not allow you to get something. Now, that also discourages the professors from doing what they should do. And that's why many professors would rather do consultancies outside the university and not within the university. Yet if they did outside the universities, they'll bring money. I mean, if they use the universities as a platform for consultancies, they'll bring in money on, benefit sharing ratio. That will benefit universities. We don't do that.
Yeah, so the reason why it cannot benefit the university, let me repeat the point I made from the very beginning. We have 2 universities in one. There is the administrative university whose vision is very short-term lived. Those are the people who look for money from treasury. We want this year. And their language is very different. It's a language of privileges and the entitlements. We have got the academic university that does research, does publishing, and does the teaching. But their vision is always curtailed by the administrative university. There are 2 visions that are very different and completely incompatible. Unless the country addresses this particular challenge of having very strong bureaucracies led by people who have no vision for being a university, I think we are not going to have the universities the way we want them. Aduda, I disagree with you that Egerton should have gone entrepreneurial. They only need to produce ideas, and people should take those ideas, patent them, that's where the money is, or you look for someone else, give them the ideas, let them come and invest on those ideas. That's why universities exist. They should not be manufacturing anything except if they are teaching people to manufacture or to improve on certain skills. Because if we go that route, then we shall not have the reason for our existence. We existed to produce ideas for a better society. We existed to produce knowledge to move the society to the next phase. But the consumers of that knowledge and those ideas are the ones we think are actually not thinking very hard about how to move forward.
So I would add on, Professor, and I mediate between that we need actually to have incubation processes. We incubate until something works, like the yogurt. Once it works, it goes out, then you earn a living from the intellectual property. If you go to MIT, there are several companies within the university. They are being incubated. When they grow, they go out. That's what we need to begin to do.
So the question also that is being put to the academicians, is the fact that there is no creative innovation that is coming from the professors as well.
There is a lot.
For the longest time. No. Because we wouldn't be talking about cash crunch here if we have novel ideas that actually can be exceedingly beneficial to this country, right?
In terms of innovation, we have innovated a lot. If you look at the Innovation Week at the University of Nairobi, you'll be surprised about the kind of innovations that you'll be seeing there. But ask yourself, what does the government, or even what is the support given to those particular innovations to move them from one stage to another? As I said, we have always a very big disconnect between what takes place within the university.
Just name one groundbreaking innovation that we have in this country, aside from the Nyayo car that people have always been talking about, and it really went down the tubes.
Actually, some of the fertilizer that is being used in this country came up from Upper Kabete. It's actually grown to become a major company with respect. If you look at the research in AIDS, it comes from the University of Nairobi. There are several actually things. It's just we bury research and keep on. I said we love opinions. Even now you are advancing opinions that we have never, because you have never asked, so that we give you 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
Some of the car tracking devices that you find in this town are produced from Chiromo. For your information.
So you raised there's an issue of interface between the government and also the universities that is lacking. And yes, even I saw today a very wonderful piece about how we have very good think tanks in this country. And I think Kenya is rated amongst the best where we have the think tanks. But the government is not tapping into these resources. There is this lack of collaboration between the universities and the government. What is feeding into this, David?
Well, there's suspicion, which Professor here alluded to, but I think it's also a culture. We've never looked at universities as the source of knowledge you can tap into. I think historical, and we've continued to perpetuate it. And for whatever reason, at certain points you see some kind of dichotomy where those in government think that universities should be there, and universities think that we are also this side. And I think we have to break that barrier. Something that I also wish to talk about, and drawing from what Professor here was talking about, when I talk of entrepreneurship and all that, what I have in mind is the universities should be able to do something that people can see. We know, for example, there are universities outside our jurisdiction, which are the top medical universities. Yes, and people go, if you go want to do research or you go for treatment, you go to those university hospitals. Now, that kind of example, this was I'm doing from, that there's no disconnect in the sense that if Egerton, for example, can also do its own yogurt and do it better, there's no harm in doing that. And I'm not saying that they leave their core business, because their core business remains teaching, research, and community service. So we're not telling them to get into commerce full-time. But if they can do it and show the world that this is how it is done, I think that would be welcome.
What happened to KU, your hospital?
KU Hospital is now becoming also an interesting scenario because the government has taken over. It was started as a teaching hospital. Now it's becoming a parastatal under the Ministry of Health, which I think we are going the route which we thought we are running away from.
We are going wrong with that, because then it's not going to resolve the problems that Kenyatta University thought envisaged from the very beginning, from the word go. And that's why I think there is a lot of ignorance among our policymakers in this country. They do things on a very short-term basis, and probably what they thought is that Kenyatta University is going to make a lot of money, And therefore, the best thing to do is to co-opt it from the very early stages in order for us to benefit from there. That's the thinking of policymakers in this country. Short-term interest, short-term focus.
He mentioned trust as well. Why is there a lack of trust from the government and the universities?
It's simply because of how policy making in this country has changed over the years. 60s and 70s, national development policies were done by the University of Nairobi. My own Institute for Development Studies was the place of call if you wanted to do national development policy in this country, all the sessional papers. But come the 80s and 90s, during the reign of President Moi, when you just castigated universities, that's where the disconnect arose. Detention of professors and the rest made some ministries shy away from professors. And then secondly, you have got policymakers who came to office and started saying universities are thinking, have got ideas that are not relevant for any society. That would tell you very clearly that that person has not gone to school. I have even very senior policymakers in this country who have said some courses should not be taught at universities. I mean, telling you that we have got quite a big chunk of Kenyan policymakers who are very ignorant, who should not be in those positions because of the manner in which they think. We began by saying universities exist for production of ideas and knowledge to make our society better. That's where there is that particular disconnect. The policymakers have not known how best to utilize ideas and knowledge produced in the universities. Let me give a very quick example. If you open any development program of any country in the West, if it's American or British or what, and look at what they want to do in Kenya, you'll see that they have quoted Kenyan scholars excessively. Studies by Kenyan scholars. Open any. Go and open any particular work and you'll see if it's in business or ICT, Bitange demos will be there.
They've been cited extensively.
They will be cited extensively because they have read these scholars. Open any document by Kenyan government and tell me whether you'll find them quoting any authority from the discipline that we know. That tells you we have a problem in terms of how we make policies and how we produce evidence for our policies.
All right, let's just move on with this.
What he's saying simply, Professor is saying simply, there is something we call a triple helix, meaning government, universities, and private sector working together. We are saying we are not producing for the industry, but you have not had the views of the private sector. They say them somewhere there. There is no forum where we meet, and they say now we need this kind of engineers, so that when we change the curriculum, we say we are going to focus on applied sciences, so that they can be relevant to industry. Nobody's saying anything, and we are saying we are going to reform the curriculum. We don't have the feedback. The policymaker it should be bringing us together and actually say, you people, you have never talked to industry, I want you to sit here and give me a solution. And that way, professors will be very happy to provide and say, this is where we are. We are at a very critical stage now in transition in terms of technologies. We are moving to more robust technologies. We should be revising our curriculum going backwards. But we are instead quarreling at the moment.
Right, and the quarrel still goes on because we have also the vice chancellors who are totally opposing the shutdown and the merger. And they claim that the exercise is being hurried without proper consultations. And they are very categorical with CS Magoha that this policy is being shoved down their throats. It's coming from the top and not the universities, which ought to have provided critical mechanism to the plan. And of course, it does not stop there as well. We have the University Academic Staff Union, that is WASU, who are also opposing this merger, I should say, saying it is punitive and it risks undermining higher education. From your own assessment, Mr. Duda, do you hold with the views which are being actually fronted here? And do you think actually there is a tearing rush from the Ministry of Education to come up with this merger and, of course, the reform that is going on currently?
Well, the point is that the problem is big. You cannot fix it in 2 weeks or in 3 weeks. It's systemic. So there must be a process of dealing with this. And this is why we need to think through what you want to do.
But there's a sense of a feeling there was no wider consultation on this particular merger plan.
Okay.
That's what he said.
So this way I'm starting from that. The whole process emanates from somewhere.
Yes.
You can see that there's a rush, but my take is that we are all convinced that there's a problem in higher education. If you start from that premise, then we go to the next level and say that what do we need to do and who should do what, how and where. Now this is where we need consultation, and this is where we need to go with an open mind, because when we go into this, we look at the university in all its entirety. We also look at the political equation, we look at the constitutional equation, we look at the economic equation. Constitutionally, now the provision says that we must have at least a university in every county. But that, in my view, is an aspirational goal. So we look at all this. How do we harmonize that? We look at what are the finances. Now, finances, we look at both what the government can put on the table and what the consumers of the university will also put on the table, and we rationalize. When you look at it, for example, at this point in time, the unit cost, the way the universities are funded are based on figures that were calculated in the 90s. More than 25 years later, we still use the same capitation basis. Now that's unrealistic. So we need to ask ourselves, what is the best model of financing universities? So I'm saying the whole question of reforming universities must be holistic, not doing it in piecemeal. Because true, in recent times, we've started some universities which, if you look at them logically, they may not make sense. Because they come and you think that they're going to offer something new, but they duplicate what University of Nairobi is doing and is doing better. They do something that KU is doing and doing better. So you ask yourself, what is their value? Now, in that case, are we going to dissipate resources in terms, personnel and finances to feed this? We ask ourselves, no, that's not the best thing. So I'm saying, the point I'm making is this. We need a holistic approach, carefully thought through, and we must be very judicious in what we do, because the problem we have in this country is that whenever a problem, we come in a rush to deal with it, then we mess it up. So you have to be very meticulous.
Right. Yes, let's just go on first.
There even us, we are being very careful not to say all the problems, but there are many problems. As articulated by each education minister who has been there for the last 6 years. When Professor Kaimenyi came, he was talking about PhDs to be rushed, isn't it? And then he talked about dealing with the issue of tribalism in the universities. That is what he saw as reform. When Matiang'i came, Dr. Matiang'i was dealing with how do we limit those who leave high school to go to university. It worked perfect, by tightening on the exam. That was the reform that was going to reduce the numbers going to universities. Professor Magoha has come and said, I will deal with the universities at the so there is no coherence to begin with on what constitutes reform from the policymakers. So it's just coming from different voices. That's what I'm trying to say. There are solutions to this. We have, when we talk a new university, we talk about a new employer. The reform that we should begin with is to first put everybody under one employer and transfer people so that you attain what the Constitution requires. Yeah? Now you are smiling like it won't work. So that is the disruption. That is the disruption. I favor that every county should have a university. Why? Because this is what has happened in other countries and worked very well. I wrote an article recently and said, look at State University of New York. There are 64 campuses, which are under one vice chancellor, one chancellor. If you did that, University of Kenya, and remove all the chancellors that we see around, have one. I'm talking about cost rationalization now.
Yes.
And remove all the vice chancellors that are going, then you have principals at college level. We can have 2 or 3 universities, which are what what is normally referred to as land-grant universities, and the rest fall within that. But within them, they make sure that at every sub-county we have a TVET, which is linked to that university. We would solve the problem. We would have a better rationalization. That's my view. Professor is shaking his head.
Shaking my head.
But,
Violently.
but we
Stoutly
would,
opposing what he said.
we would deal with issues of politics, number one, that nobody would feel excluded. What we are talking is exclusivity. And those who are talking are those who have universities in their counties, you know. When you say we don't get a university in Samburu, in Mandera, what do they think? They will be talking about marginalization. That's what we need to deal with in this
But are
aspect.
we having them because of political correctness?
Not correctness.
Yeah, because yes,
but
if we say we want...
We are talking about inclusivity. I don't know what you call it, but I'm talking about inclusivity.
Yeah, I'm opposed to my colleague here, a good friend here, to that view. It won't work. And the reason why it won't work is because we have not trained enough manpower to teach in these 47 universities that we shall be talking about. I would prefer a situation where we say, let's use the next 6 years to train manpower specifically for different specializations for different purposes. And then after that, we can think about where they need to be taken to. But we have never trained manpower at the university to say that actually these are professors that we are producing for the future. The second thing is that I think instead of having 47 universities, we need to have specialization among the universities. I don't see why the University of Nairobi should be continuing to offer undergraduate courses in some areas. They should be offering graduate courses in certain areas. I do not see why Egerton should be having certain courses which other universities have got better professors and more skills to offer them, and Egerton does agriculture. JKUAT was a university for technology. I don't see why some other universities in the villages should be offering what JKUAT is doing. That we need to think about what each university will be doing and train manpower for that. But we need about 6 years to train manpower specifically for taking off with the universities in a different way and in a better way, if that's the route to take.
What that does is you are forgetting that in this day and age, we are talking about interdisciplinary.
Yeah.
Meaning that you don't just produce a doctor, you know, they have to be taught from other areas. So if we talk about specialization, we would again be having people driving all the way to KU to teach on behalf from this. So it's not very easy.
It's not practical.
It's not very practical.
But we have the Commission of University Education suggesting that creation of, just as you're saying, a regional university system, by merging universities with the same geographical locations and converting most of the existing universities into constituent colleges or campuses. Even that is not practical?
Yeah, but that one to a point is, if it's regional, but then you have got an umbrella university, that's what they are suggesting. I don't know how practical that one is going to be. Because the problem is not the numbers, actually. The problem is the governance, is the way we are.
Is the governance of these institutions?
Yes. You know, we need to rethink the model very, very, very carefully.
Right.
As I said from the very beginning, the manja is dead on arrival.
Fantastic. Taking mental notes of these silent points that you've raised, we want to take a short break right now. Best model for financing universities, what will that be? Also, a holistic approach. There's a lack of coherence. So we have so many voices, but we don't have a proper, a channel to actually voice all these cacophony of so many voices that we have around as well. So these are things that we need to talk about. And when we circle back, I think we segued into the political logic. Yeah, now we're discussing about the counties. We're discussing also about political correctness, the pronouncements that were there. What are we leaving because we want to appease some politicians who said during, the campaigning period that yes, we'll have universities in this country, so that they have actually to bring that dream up, right? So should we follow their ways as well? So these are some of the critical questions also we shall be asking on the other side of the break as well. So we take a short break. Don't go away, much more coming up on the other side of the break.
Hicho bausa ni nini ndogo ndogo hapa mimi pia nimtupe huko, I don't care. I don't care.
Nimekwambia mwenye nyumba anakuja. Unanisikiza lakini?
Kama ulikuwa unajua utawezana na hii kazi, si ungesoma, sasa ungekuwa lawyer, pilot.
Welcome to the house of the Janet. You is go where?
Shifere inaitwa Building Bridges Initiative.
Nyenye. Usi class yako? Uni mama yako na watoto watatu pale Technical Institute.
It will be rough and messy.
The Real House Helps of Kawangware in association with Telkom.
Join Telkom today and share life on our expanded 4G network. Telkom, moving with you.
Where are we headed as a country?
Every time we make a step forward, we do two backwards.
Any fool with huge amounts of money can be president of this country. It is no longer about service.
Why can't we move these people out and find somebody who can make the right decision for the country?
You're the experts, you can tell me.
We have to change the way we arrive at our leaders. We have to.
Organized crime, terrorism, and corruption, they're really siblings.
We don't need 10 cases. We just need 2 cases done properly, and it will serve a lesson.
Justice can only be found if I prosecute what I have claimed, bring the evidence, and say this man is guilty.
AM Live, every weekday morning on NTV.
Welcome back. You're watching a Sidebar, and of course also I can see a rush of tweets here already from some of our viewers. We have Shady Opio, and he's saying it's absurd how the government of Kenya is very determined in fighting itself through its own learning institutions. Are they admitting we've been subject to unscrupulous education system from the beginning? Your views. We have also James One saying administrative staff have more benefits, and this is what Matiang'i was saying, that people high up there are forming administrative jobs for their relatives. Nepotism is also at the administrative level as well. We have Francis Mutegi saying that Professor Bitangi has been in management. Why not take up the core role of championing reforms? Briefly, what happened to Konza City? A probably question for you there as well. Also, we have Ronald Wamalo saying proper consultation and research ought to be done to get a way forward on merger. I think the issue that we just raised earlier about what the VCs are saying as well with the caucus, that there was no proper consultation that was done. So let's move on with the conversation, that we are now on political logic, and I'd actually teased out this issue that the Commission for University Education was fronting, a creation of regional university system. Let's dwell on it. Do you think this is feasible? Because this is what they're actually proposing to the minister. Let's begin with you.
Regional universities, I think from the outset, when we start talking about regional universities, we are talking about tribalism. We are talking about regional universities when we have not dealt with the simple, most important problem of tribalism in this country, because that's how some politicians will interpret it. They will
yes, and I wish also Professor Lebana Yiro will have been on this show to actually tell us also what the rigors.
You have seen that politicians have been demanding to have vice chancellors from their own villages as vice chancellors of their universities, and this has been a common practice, except at the University of Nairobi, probably, and at the Kenyatta University. Other universities have actually been co-opted by this particular kind of shenanigans that have been taking place. So that's a fundamental problem we shall have to deal with if we go that particular route, unless we anchor it on a very clear policy directive, a very clear policy formulation that tries to address that particular challenge of why do we want them to be at the regional level? What is it that we are resolving by calling it a regional university that is having several other campuses of several other colleges inside there? I remember even in the old days when we introduced colleges in this country, they were introduced for a particular political problem. But now some of them are relevant, others are not relevant. So we must really think very seriously about what kind of problem do we want to address, even by merger. Are we trying to merge universities in order to produce better ideas, better knowledge, and make them relevant for national development, or are we cutting costs? If we are cutting costs, then we are missing the point, because that's not what universities are for. In fact, as I said earlier, we are not even funding them enough.
Right, because I think also we have here Constantine Wasonga actually wondering how merging broke universities will make them financially sound, right? So I think he's also alluding to what you are really saying. That should not be the way to go. But the critical question is as well, we have the Vice Chancellor saying that we should raise the fees from 16,000 as it is right now, because for 3 whole decades we've actually stuck on that 16,000 to 48,000.
It's not the solution.
It is not the solution.
Yes.
But this is what the Vice Chancellors from universities are saying. Yeah.
Those are administrative. The Vice
so this is where we get
members of administrative university. They are not academics. So they have missed the point.
This is where we get a dichotomy right now. Yeah,
yes.
The administrative and the academics.
Yes, they have missed the point. It's not fees.
It's not fees.
Yes.
Aduda, it's not fees. But this is what they are really fronting, their proposal to Magoha.
You know, the VCs were making very interesting proposals. Fees is one of them, and additional funding from the government. The question is, as of now, why are the universities broke? My submission is that part of it is the cost structure, and we've talked about it before. We have some stuff we don't need. We do things that we don't need. So we end up consuming all the monies that should be used for critical ventures. We use them in the wrong way. Then after that, you say that I've cleared my coffers, I need more money. That's not the best approach. We must look at where's the problem. Now, at the height of Module 2, when there's a lot of revenues coming into universities, what did we see? You know, there were questions of governance, transparency, and use of that money. Because I know, and Professor here will also confirm this, whatever number of students you have in the module class, the amount of money they get, there's a ratio that will finally also go to the top. Even if the top is not involved in the actual today teaching. So the question of the benefits overriding even what should go to the university itself, because if your core business is teaching, you should ensure that there are resources, teaching labs, or workshops, facilities, and all that, and that the lecturers who offer the teaching are actually well paid. So guys who sit in offices, why should they also be apportioned part of the revenues that you generate from here? Now, that's the thinking that permeates through this thing of let's increase the fees. But look at it logically, I must say that the fees as currently constituted is not adequate. But it doesn't mean that if you increase it, you're going to plug the gap. I'm saying that we need to look at the efficient or the most appropriate fee unit that you should charge as it is now, because I think it is not commensurate to the services you want to offer the students. Yeah.
The issue was also fees. I think when we had the Model 2, which I think right now also is really going down the tubes as it is not as robust as it was before, generating a lot of income for the institutions. First of all, we had also the entrance now of the massification, because I think that was the idea. Why we go for Module 2, we want more money. But how has that also adversely affected quality? Because it seems, yes, we have all this mass production of graduates, like in a factory. We regurgitate knowledge, regurgitate it, then move on. We have so many graduates right now unemployed.
We applauded President Kibaki for free education.
Yes.
Where were those students going? Where did you expect them to go? We should have started planning from then that this would go to high school, to university. We did not plan for that. And the explosion of student population in universities was envisaged. Nobody planned for it when we were happy that the president had brought free education. When we started offering free secondary education, what did you expect? You expected more people to go to university. And what I expect, if there will be another promise, is that we should have free undergraduate education so that we can actually finish. This is what happens. We should be looking at what other countries are doing so that we replicate. Either we get banks to provide loans to students to go through university, the way it's done in other countries, or completely subsidize undergraduate education. Yeah. The problem we keep on saying is money. Money has never been a problem when I told you that we have not optimized the resources that we have. Yeah.
All right. So because the issue also is the fact that we have the massification of education right now, but the quality has really gone down. People are wondering, what are our graduates doing? Because when there's no that interface between the labor market and our graduates as it is right now. In fact, even the FKE came up with a report recently that even after graduating, we need to retrain these graduates, you know, so that they actually can be at par with the labor market as it is right now. Professor Kanyanga.
Let me say this. The employers who are saying the quality of education has gone down, they need to bring statistics to demonstrate that. Because even in the 80s and 90s and 70s, every company that used to employ a university graduate, they would have a management trainee. What was the purpose of management trainee? Even in this nation, Media Group itself used to hire people that I know during the 80s would be hired as management trainee, where you'd go through a period of about 6 months on job training. Now, if an employer thinks that you can leave the university and straight to the job without a proper training in that particular sector, then that's having a very interesting way of thinking. But in the West, what they do is that the industries are linked to the universities from the very beginning.
They work well.
They work very well and interlinked, so that when the student is doing an undergraduate course, the relevant industry is already told that our university would like to have an opportunity for our students. That linkage has completely disappeared. And that's what I said from the very beginning. The national development process must be linked to the university development in this country, so that universities become relevant to the national development process, and we do not have to ask these questions if we interlink the industry with the various disciplines that we have. At present, as I said from the very beginning, is lacking. If you take the infrastructure, for instance, the roads industry that we have seen, the expansion of roads in this country is taking place without even a single department of engineering in any university being interlinked with the companies that are doing those jobs. And yet that's where we get practice. That's where the students will get practical knowledge of what's happening.
Actually, the Ministry of Communication usually have the presidential trainees. They go through training for 1 year. They are posted in several ministries. That gives them exposure in industry. Imagine if every ministry were to do that. That's more than 10,000 young people who are going through training.
Even in the hospitality industry, there is no hospitality industry that trains people, even chefs or anyone, and throws them into the kitchen like that. You first of all must have a trainee. So I think the employers who are saying that the people do not have the relevant skills, I think they need to rethink their connection to the university.
But yes, they're still raising accusatory fingers to this whole issue of massification, and they're criticizing now the devaluation of education by providing a plethora of quasi-academic courses that we do have. That's why they're actually saying we can actually put the classes together of these particular programs. We have knitwears, even degrees on knitwear, on also beauty therapy, golf course management.
There is some truth to that.
There's some truth.
There's some
truth
to
the
ratio of a lecturer to student actually went up. There is some truth to that, to whatever they are saying. Then we should deploy more resources. We should not be saying we limit the number of kids coming to university. We should actually be hiring more people so that the ratio comes down and you get the quality that you are looking for.
Remember the point I made, that the ratio of academic staff to administrative staff is very high. I have seen lecturers who teach a class of 700 students without a mic.
Without a mic?
Without a mic. And yet outside there are about 17 cleaners on different corners of that hall where you are teaching. And you wonder, what do you have 17 cleaners outside doing? when the lecturer himself doesn't have a mic for 17 students.
Oh, yeah.
And that lecturer will mark those scripts. He expects to have one-on-one conversation with the students. That's not possible. So I'm simply saying that there is some truth about the quality, and that quality of education in some disciplines, not all disciplines, in some disciplines, but it has got to do with what we have done as a country.
Right.
I remember also from the very beginning, the 844 itself has not also been the best place for training students who are coming to the university. So we have a serious problem that we must, as a nation, have a dialogue and a conversation among ourselves and ask how do we address these particular challenges.
Right. I just want to project also what has been proposed by the Vice Chancellor's caucus as well, or the types of universities and respective ratios of student numbers. If may just turn and just look at the screen there. This is what they want to be clustered there: traditional and comprehensive, university type, science and technology, technical and vocational, specialized and graduate. And of course, you have the total there, arts-based, the percentages given as well, total students number in percentages as well. I just wanted to comment on this because Betange, also from your article, you said the global average ratio of student to faculty is 16 compared to the average ratio in Kenya universities of 70 per faculty, well above the Commission of Higher Education requirement of 1 to 50 for theoretical based courses and 1 to 20 for practical based courses. And of course, top ranked universities average 5 students per faculty. Any reform will have to address these numbers pedagogically, methods and curriculum in order to improve quality. So looking at this cluster and what they're actually proposing, Mr. Duda, what will be your take? You think also this will fly?
Well, theoretically, it sounds good, thinking of specializing. But my challenge with it is that we are starting from a prescriptive point of view. We've not established what the basis of doing that. For example, the ratios being apportioned. Why do you think that 40% should go to the comprehensive type of universities? And is that what we need now? I'm not sure if there is evidence to suggest and support that. And then the other thing is, as you go into this, what is our mindset? Remember, when more universities was being started in the early 80s, it was meant to be a science and technology driven university.
Yes.
We changed course. The same with JKUAT, the same with Egerton. What is it that this would be the model we want to go? So I think we need to think about these things more critically before just throwing in the figures. But the long and short of it is, and the practice in many parts of the world, that there's some universities that specialize in certain areas. That's why you have the MITs of the world, you have the LSE, people know them for what they specialize in. But it's not being prescribed the way I see we are taking the route here.
Let me give a joke. It's a real life experience that has happened. We have converted some of these technical colleges into universities. The people who were teaching in these technical colleges in the old days are people whom TSC and employed as teachers there. Some of them had a pass degree or a lower degree, and somehow they got scholarship through the Ministry of Education to do a master's degree outside. Right? So theoretically, they had not really specialized to teach in a university. All of a sudden, the universities are made, that college is made a university. Now, when it's made a university and you receive, you get regular students coming, and you are teaching them, some of these lecturers are running away from class. They are not even going to class, right? Because they cannot face these people because that's not the caliber. They cannot engage even the students who are coming to the university. Now, when we talk about merger, who are you merging with? What kind of rationalization have you of staff that you have addressed? And two, when you look at what the vice chancellors are doing, what problem are they really addressing? Is it the problem of quality? Is it the problem of staffing? Is it the ratio of students to the lecturers? Or what is the problem are we dealing with as a nation? I don't see that even from the Ministry of Education. I'm not sure that I've been told this is the problem we want to address as a country.
Right. Betange?
I actually concur with him. We need to define the problem very clearly and then find the numbers to justify our decisions. We have so many people, we have professors who have done research in education, educational curriculum, and it won't take too long to do such a research.
But we don't use them.
We're not using them to help generate those numbers that we need to use to make decisions.
Right.
Anyway, whatever we have said here, these are just opinions, but that can only be validated
right.
by
I'll be remiss of course we don't
research,
talk about research as well, because I think this is where we have a lot of, the professors also and some students also belly aching that there's not enough research fund allocated to the universities, and the National Research Fund is yet to receive from the National Treasury an estimated 2.9 billion shillings owed to researchers in the forms of grants, leaving researchers and academics unable to forge ahead with planned projects. This is where you really stuck at as well. But my question is, we have you mentioned the state universities of New York as well. We have Stanford. They have, research in incubators, which are very robust. And they also produce innovative ideas that is generating income, even funding the government. Why is it vice versa here, that you have, as I mentioned before, a pail in hand always asking from the National Treasury? Why can't we have those creative innovative ideas that we were talking before, that it is very novel and it is income generating, that you can even supplement and support the government? We
have never addressed the purpose of universities in the national development process. We have talked about incoherent policies and incoherent voices. That's where the problem lies. Why do we have universities? For what purpose? How do we use them in the national development process? Have we answered that question? Other countries have answered that question, and that's why they're doing very well. Malaysia, Singapore. There is no university that is not contributing to the national development process. Look at India. The RISE research projects that have been there for years, Southeastern Asia. The RISE projects, research projects that have been there, they resolved the food security problem a long time ago. Look at Rwanda and its national university today. There's no single sector that doesn't depend on that university for ideas and for research findings in order to move forward. Do we use any particular sector, any particular discipline in this country to inform our national policies? My answer is very clear, no.
No. This disconnect, Aduda.
Yes.
I think we can hear they are talking on cross purposes as well. I think there are many silos that you mentioned that we need to integrate so that we can have a seamless flowing, a holistic approach to this, as you mentioned before. But moving forward as well, we will be remiss if we don't also tackle the issues of PhDs. We had 118 PhDs that they were doubtful, and I think also the ministry took cognizance of that and said the Senate should investigate this, and they're circling back to the minister as well. This particular institution, as we know it, is not really, of course, business-oriented in the first place. It was supposed to be a technical institution, and science and technology, that should have been the bias. But because what we're talking about, the massification itself, that this is where we have the masses going for the business for the faculty of business. That is where now we have dubious PhDs. So I'm given to understand even right now, within 2 years, you can get a PhD in this country.
Not
right?
in the University of Nairobi.
Not at the University of Nairobi.
I know you'll actually protect your universities.
No, the evidence is there, my friend.
But out there, we know that yes, within 2 years we can have PhDs. Yeah. And there's this hustler degrees that also people are talking about currently. Yes,
I would say not in what happened at the university where there were 118 students. It was the number of supervisors. There were very few. There is a ratio 1 to 3, 1 supervisor for 3 students.
Not 4.
And, no,
or it's 4 at a pinch.
3 PhD, okay. Yes. But somehow there were 12 or something like that. But I don't think they took 2 years. And that is not, the problem is, where was the regulator when that happened? When the process was going on, the regulator should know you have 400 PhD students, you have less than 20 PhDs who can supervise them. They should have questioned before the fact. Before the fact. You can't wait and they say, no, we got you now. That's not the way of...
let me say that...
let's say from Oduda,
there are different ways in which you find whether PhD is of quality or not good quality. One is that PhD contributing knowledge in that particular area? And you do that by asking, as the student generated new knowledge, new ideas, contributing to knowledge. The second thing that we use these days is, as this student published in refereed journals. As I understand, some of the students established their own journals, or some lecturers established their own journals in River Road and published in what we call predatory journals. Yes. If you come to the University of Nairobi, no student will ever pay to be published. Some of the journals these days, you pay them and they publish you. We don't do that. That's what we call predatory journals. So you can tell a quality of a PhD on basis of where has this student published. Who are the supervisors? Are they published in that area? Because as I said from the very beginning, they are professors and professors.
Yeah, professors and professors.
Yes. And we know ourselves, my dear friend. You look at what people have published. Yes.
And thank you.
And where.
And where.
Yes.
Aluda.
Yes, interesting bit. I'll go back to what Professor Bitange had talked about of policy coherence. A while ago, about 2014 or so, Commission for University Education gave a directive that all universities must be taught by PhDs. And they gave a deadline for master's, lecturers, master's qualifications to attain degrees. Now that created a rat race. People started saying we have to get this. Now universities of their own, some universities were also saying we are being judged by the number of PhDs that we produce. So you also start, a pipeline. So what are we saying? That part of the problem that we see is the way we define policies and we execute them. We come with the fiats and then we don't think of the ramifications 2 years, 3 years down the line. Now, these things are coming now to haunt us. I like the point of, refereed journals. But I can dare tell you that very few people know about those refereed journals. Many people go through the graduate programs without even getting to understand which are these. And for that reason, and I can state it, I've gotten requests from people telling us, can you publish this or stories, because I'll also put it as part of my documentation for my program. And say, no, as we are a mass circulating paper, we are not a referee journal, so what you publish here cannot be used as a testimonial for you to go and get your PhD or master. Yeah. So there's a disconnect there, which you have to deal with in this question of checking.
I'm sure that's not a student from the University of Nairobi.
Let me not. But you've got those requests, which is interesting. Yeah. And for me, the fact that I'm in education, so I say, no, what you're doing cannot be acceptable. So we cannot even dare. If you want to publish, just publish as a writer, because all of us are writers. But this one is a mass circulating paper. It's not a referee journal. And don't use it to go and earn any degree.
What about also the VCs who have not even published? Because I think there are some people who are taking special umbrage with the fact that we have people who are heading these institutions and they have not even published any article.
A majority of vice chancellors in this country are political appointees.
They're political appointees.
And they're answerable to certain politicians who have made them, given them those particular positions. And that's why I said most of the vision of our universities is lost, simply because even the competitive process that we used to have, I think Professor Magoha was maybe the only person who was recruited in his first term through a very competitive process, through I think PricewaterhouseCoopers or KPMG, I can't remember. But I don't think anyone else has ever gone through that particular laborious process of producing someone else. Maseno also did try that in the first round. But these days, whatever we call competitive process is actually a competitive ethnic profiled process.
In fact, now we are taking it to PSC, public service.
To public service as well.
Yes. But what we are doing is actually a competition between tribes in order to appoint vice chancellors. And I can repeat that. We don't have a competitive process of appointing vice chancellors.
So this is the political logic that we're talking about as well. Yes. There's so much political influence, even in appointment of the VCs as well.
And that's how universities have lost their autonomy in terms of making even key decisions on what they need to teach and how they need to teach. Even infiltration of various decision-making organs. Small things like student elections. Universities cannot make proper decisions on that. That tells you how we have undermined their independence.
Bitange.
Yep. My view is that we should get good managers to manage universities, period. Not the PhD, not whatever. We get managers.
Must you also be a PhD holder? That's another question, Duda, because I think we teased out that at the beginning. Should I be a PhD holder to actually be a VC?
Well, it's debatable. I know hospitals have gone the other route where you have hospitals being managed by non-doctors. And that's the thinking that people are saying. And other universities in other parts of the world have tried it. Some successfully, some have flopped. But it's good to experiment.
The truth is we have never overcome that aspect that I am a PhD and this is a non-PhD interviewing me for a professorial position. And I think it's all culture.
It's all culture.
And it's all culture. And we haven't addressed the question of actually what do we want our universities to do. And once we answer that question, it will become very clear that good managers are not necessarily people with a PhD. But as I said earlier, there are some functions, positions that you'll always require a PhD because of what is required of them. For instance, the dean, someone like the deputy vice chancellor in charge of academic affairs. Those are PhD positions really, because you need people who have contributed substantively in terms of publishing, in terms of research, and they are well known in those particular areas.
Okay. So as we are coming to a close, the question that is really hanging on the rafters of many Kenyans' minds is the fact that, yes, we're talking about 100% transition, right? And here we're talking about the mergers and even the closures of some universities. I know even Nairobi University has 20 programs actually now will be slashed as it is right now. But they're saying, moving on, looking to 2030, of course we will need these institutions. We will need these institutions because we'll be having a lot of people, our students actually seeking higher education. So why should we go for the mergers? And we're talking about 100% transition. So there seems to be a disparity in some of these policymakers that we do have here. Why 100% transition? And of course, even looking at the entire curriculum-based, the CBC that we're talking about, it seems it is only on the higher education beat that we don't have an overhaul. So I don't know where will be the interface. We're preparing all these people that are talent-based, yet the universities, they've not even changed their curricula up to now. When do we start the conversation as we're winding up?
I think we have a problem in the sense that we are venting on universities on problems that we have not been able to solve nationally, especially unemployment. And we are saying those who are graduating and not getting jobs, we are blaming them for no reason. My view is that let us give these young people the best education that we can give them, and you would find them being absorbed in Mauritius, in other places to work. There are places which would require. For us to take advantage of what is called population dividend, we have average age of 19, Europe has an average age of 50. They would need people to work all over the place. Remember one time we took our teachers to Seychelles to teach in Seychelles. And Rwanda. And in Namibia, all over the place. Let us work to produce, since we have those who are willing to study at that level, give them the best education. That's what we should be looking at. Then we must begin to think, how do we raise money at the universities? What are the problems that we're having at the universities that they are not able to raise sufficient resources? Are they optimizing resources? You know, such questions, so that we don't stifle the number of kids going to university. What do you do with them without education? They can't go to Mauritius to work if they didn't get that higher education. So we need to think very carefully and say we need to open up. Actually, I favor more of a liberal or capitalist where the market determines who goes through university. These universities will die if the regulator is strong and we leave it to people to choose, such that I fear to go certain university because the regulators have said this doesn't work. You will not see a student there. These universities would collapse. That is the easiest way of dealing with these things. If you start doing it yourself, then you would begin to hear you have excluded others, you know, we were whatever marginalized. There are ways of actually dealing with it through a regulator.
Right.
Yeah.
Professor Kanyinga, where we're headed right now, I think projecting forward, everyone will be a PhD holder maybe 20 years, 30 years to come.
There are very
right?
few. There are very few actually. I think. I mean, you can tell him that there are just very few people who.
But we're saying with the interest that now is speaking with the public as well, moving forward. If we go to an interview, you'll be having all these PhDs presented to you. That extra factor about you will be the determining factor. The world now is changing. It's not people who are wearing ties that are making good money as it is right now. It's people who are dribbling balls, you know, wearing shorts actually, who are making good money as it is. And we can actually allude to that fact as well. So my question is, yes, we are having all these curriculum development right now that is talent-based, but how are we prepared? Because if we have all this massification of, was it the diploma disease what they were talking about in the 1970s, right? That we have all these degrees in the market, but everyone will be having the same qualification. That extra factor, what will it be? And how will it determine also?
I think from the very beginning, there are ways of judging a good PhD from a bad PhD. Right? Please remember the point I made. So even those PhDs that everyone is running for,
yes,
some of them are of good quality and others are not very good quality. And as he has said, the liberal market will resolve that fundamental problem.
So we leave it to the market forces.
I usually use Utali as a very good example. It trained the best manpower for the region. Today there is no five-star or five-star hotel you'll go to in the region without getting a Kenyan who has been trained at Utali College.
Thank you.
The same with the universities in the region, from Mauritius everywhere.
Right.
That's what we should be aiming for. Produce the best, not necessarily for our Kenyan market.
Thank you. Aduda.
I'll go back to stating that we have to rationalize the universities in terms of courses, programs, staffing, and the cost, so that in areas where we find that there is duplication or we're not adding any value, we don't need them. And that's where market will also help us, because some of this will just fall off. You remember when COOPs released some statistics sometimes, the courses which were not taken, for the reason that the students made the deliberate choice of not taking them. So obviously with time, those universities themselves will just say, we don't need this because there's nobody coming to that. So that can take care of it. But we also must have a deliberate strategy of developing higher education, not only universities, but also tertiary and other levels, because all these things feed into each other. If people don't go to universities, where else do they go? What are the options? And how do they feed into the economy? So there should be a coherent policy looking at the needs of the economy, looking at the talents that we require, and the kind of institutions we need to achieve that. And in those institutions, we also look at who is going to teach in those institutions, because now I see we are going into TVET. We want to establish a TVET in every constituency. You don't know who's going to teach there, you don't know what kind of program they're going to do, so we're going to create another problem. So that's why I'm talking of this strategic and holistic approach to dealing with this.
Fantastic, fantastic. Right, we want to also bring up our toon side so that you can comment as well on the editorial cartoon that was recently also drawn by Victor. If we just put it up, that is, of course, Professor Magoha. And we've actually also teased out some of the remarks he's made as far as these reforms is concerned. Reform or else, right? Those who don't reform, they shall, of course, face the music. So I wanted just you to comment on this. That is the bull, that is Magoha, that is in the China shop. And this is the aspect of the management. Do you think that Professor Magoha is sort of a foot on the neck manager? This is the style of his management as far as running that particular ministry is concerned? I leave it for you now to decipher that particular Katun.
I'm sorry to begin by saying that Professor Magoa is a very good friend of mine. I am reluctant to comment on this cartoon because that's not how I know him, but I know several things about Magoa himself. He's very decisive, he's very focused, and is not a person who loves sideshows. He's directional, he's focused, and he loves actually achieving. Achievement becomes a very core principle for him. He made the University of Nairobi what it is today, and I must admit that. He came to the University of Nairobi when it was a very dirty place to live in, when we had no systems. He pushed the university to have systems and to put things in order. I would not really like to, he's a personal friend, I wouldn't like
to comment
on this cartoon.
Fantastic, and respect your views as
Yes.
well. Professor Bitangen Demo,
right.
I know from the same university.
I agree with Professor. And sometimes you need that style of leadership to achieve. Sometimes you need, he's done good at the University of Nairobi, and we pray for him to do well in the Ministry of Education. Yeah.
All right. Let's hear from Mr. Aduda as well.
Yes, what counts for him beside the University of Nairobi is what he did at the Kenya National Examination Council. I had said that he will not accept cheating and dealt with it. I know we reached a point in this country when exams are no longer exams. They were just products for the highest bidder. He dealt with that. So he has that sense of drive and decisiveness that makes him make things happen. What I tell him, because he's also a good friend of mine, is that he needs to consult.
He needs to consult.
Yeah.
He needs to consult.
He needs to consult.
Right. And the towing and froing on the CBC with, of course, Secretary General of NAT, that is Sosion, who has been deregistered by TAC as well. I think that is what the pillars we're having there, or some of the Chinas that we can see falling from either side. This is the new curriculum and the universities as well. He's in between.
I actually support him 100%
You support
on
him?
CBC.
On CBC?
If you allow me, I will say a few things very quickly. The current system of education has been very discriminatory, in the sense that the slow learners, we left them behind. And education is a process. I mean, some will be slower, but they would get there at some point. And that's what CBC is meant to solve, that even the slow learners can be pushed to be able to understand. If they are able to utilize technology as they are promising, then we are going to see a lot more many young people get an education. I support him 100% on that.
I have very little faith in Kenya National Union of Teachers, because most of the teachers don't have their children in public schools. They have their children in the local academies. And then they give us a raw deal in the public sector. Let me keep quiet.
Right. Thank you. Aduda, your closing remarks, I think you gave them?
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you. Right, and of course, we have lost also a very prominent leader in this country. And I think from the world of academia, I should say, is where we can give you a handy opportunity to also pay tribute to Joyce Laboso, the cancer burden that also is, a niggling worry in this particular country. We have leaders who are actually going, I don't know, one after the other within a very short spell of time. And I will say that tonight on Timber, the burden of cancer has become a nightmare that has refused to go away. According to a report, globally, cancer causes more deaths than HIV, TB, and malaria combined. And in Kenya, it ranks third as a cause of death after infectious and cardiovascular diseases. And with some now calling on the government to declare it a national disaster. Tonight on Timber, we remember some of the notable figures that were taken too soon. The dark days is on Tuesday, the 27th September 2011. Professor Wangari Maathai bound to ovarian cancer. Wangari Maathai, from 1940 to 2011, the headlines read, "The world mourns Nobel laureate in August 9, 2016, Nyeri Governor Nderitu Gachagua succumbed to pancreatic cancer at the Royal Marsden Hospital in London." A year later, in April 2017, the country mourned the death of TV host Janet Kanini Kua. Parts of the headline read, "Touching tributes pour in for a woman who has seen the face of resilience in the fight against cancer, a disease that continues to wreak havoc in thousands of Kenyan homes. Same year, on the 7th of December, the curtains close on Francis Nyanze, who lost a 10-year-old battle with colon cancer. In April 2018, leaders and residents of Baringo South eulogized MP Grace Kipchoim as a peace champion and a crusader who united warring pastoral communities by initiating development projects after she lost the battle to cancer. This year, especially this month of July, where we as a country have lost Bob Colimo, CEO Safaricom, also Honorable Ken Okoth, MP Kibra, and Bomet Governor Joyce Laboso to this illness. These are just but a few of those who end up in our headlines. Many more are dying, with a report saying that at least 90 people lose their lives to cancer daily, with a glaring shortage of specialists to manage the infected, which stands at an estimated 48,887. So I want just to have a moment of silence, just a brief minute of silence, just in honor of those that we've lost, especially also with Dr. Joyce Laboso, who was from the world of academia, and the MP Ken Okoth as well, just to, in respect of that as well. Many thanks indeed, and our deepest sympathy and sincere condolences to the families. We do appreciate you this evening. Bitange Ndemo, Associate Professor, University of Nairobi, also Professor Karuti Kanyinga, who is a Research Professor, Development Studies at the University of Nairobi, David Aduda, Education Expert here at Nation Media Group. We thank you so much. Also, in absentia, we want to thank Professor Laban Ayiro, who could not have made it, who is the Vice Chancellor of Daystar University. Also, we thank you so very much wherever you are. I know you really wanted to be in this particular discussion, but you couldn't make it for one reason or the other. And for you also, for your valid company. Can I read just one or two tweets as we're winding up? I can see many of them. We have Dr. V.O. Oria saying most of our universities have more non-teaching than teaching staff. Also, we do have Kabi Iliud saying the rain started beating us the moment the system commercialized education. The introduction of parallel degrees made acquiring one a money issue, not for research but for job promotions. We are seeing that now being admitted to the bar as well. Thank you so much for your tweets. I cannot just be able to read all of this, but we thank you nonetheless for the rush of tweets as well. My name is Debarl Inea. I've been sitting in for Ken Mijolo. Thank you.